They called it the wedding of the century, a love story wrapped in diamonds and deceit. When the billionaire bride's yacht exploded off the coast of Monaco, everyone thought she was gone forever. But beneath the calm blue waves she was already plotting her return, to expose the man who tried to kill her. The morning of the wedding was golden. The kind of light that made the French Riviera look unreal, as if painted by someone with too much affection for wealth and beauty. Isabelle Laurent stood on the balcony of her suite at the Hotel de Paris, watching the sea glitter like it knew her secret. The city below was already humming with the noise of journalists, drones, and guests eager to witness what magazines were calling the merger of love and empire. She adjusted the diamond earring in her left ear, a piece her fiancé Alexander Voss had given her. It cost more than most people's houses, yet it hung heavy on her like guilt. Madame Laurent, her assistant Clara called softly from inside. The car is ready. Isabelle turned. Clara, don't call me that yet. Clara smiled nervously. You will be in 2 hours. 2 hours. 2 hours until she would stand beside Alexander, billionaire investor, philanthropist, the man who had seemingly saved her from loneliness after her father's death. 2 hours until she would say vows she didn't entirely believe anymore. Because last night she found something she wasn't supposed to. It started with a phone left unlocked on the marble counter of their penthouse bathroom. She wasn't snooping, at least not intentionally. But when the screen lit up with a message from CM, her curiosity had flickered like a match. He doesn't suspect a thing. Once the papers are signed, we'll transfer everything. And then, freedom. Isabelle's heart had dropped. Her father's voice echoed in her head. Never trust anyone who wants to marry your money faster than your heart. For months she had ignored the warning signs. The way Alexander deflected questions about their prenup. The quiet conversations on his private phone. The change in tone when she mentioned her late father's company shares. And now she had proof. But instead of confronting him, she smiled through the morning. She played the role of the radiant bride, her laughter captured by cameras, her dress trailing like a dream. Because Isabelle wasn't the kind of woman who cried and begged. She was the kind who planned. The ceremony took place at the St. Nicholas Cathedral. White roses, crystal chandeliers, the whole city watching. When Alexander lifted her veil, his smile was perfect, his eyes steady. No one would have guessed the monster behind the mask. They exchanged vows that made the crowd sigh. He promised eternity, she promised silence. Later that night, aboard the Celeste, their 80-meter yacht, the celebrations continued. Champagne flowed like water. A string quartet played under the stars. Isabelle danced, her hand resting lightly on Alexander's chest, her eyes studying the man she once thought she loved. At midnight, she excused herself and went below deck. There, hidden inside a small safe, was her father's journal, and a USB drive she had taken from Alexander's office weeks earlier. It contained emails, documents, and transfers linking him to offshore accounts and a woman named Claudia Mertens, CM. The same initials from the message. Claudia wasn't just his mistress. She was his co-conspirator. Together, they had built a plan to take control of Isabelle's company shares once the marriage was legal, transfer assets to their shell firms and disappear. She closed the safe and steadied her breath. Her reflection in the mirror looked calm, but her pulse was wild. When she returned to the deck, Alexander was leaning against the railing, the moonlight cutting sharp lines across his face. "There you are," he said, smiling. "I thought my bride had run away." "Would you miss me?" she asked lightly. He kissed her forehead. "More than anything." The lie was so smooth it almost fooled her again. An hour later the explosion shattered the night. Guests screamed. The yacht rocked violently. Flames licked the deck, eating through silk and glass. Alexander shouted orders, pretending to save whoever he could. But in the chaos he never noticed that Isabelle was already gone. Because Isabelle Laurent had never planned to die. 3 days earlier she had quietly arranged everything with the help of a trusted friend, Captain Renaud, an old associate of her father's. They had replaced one of the yacht's smaller life rafts with a specially fitted underwater pod, stocked with oxygen, a burner phone, and a few essentials. When the explosion hit, she slipped into the sea and disappeared beneath the smoke. The pod's hatch sealed behind her. From the surface, it looked like she had been swallowed by the waves. The world mourned the tragic death of Isabelle Laurent. News outlets ran tributes. Her company issued statements. Alexander wept publicly, his performance flawless. Claudia, the mistress, stayed carefully out of sight. For a week, Isabelle remained hidden in a safe house along the Italian coast. No mirrors, no phones, no contact except with Renaud, who brought her updates. "She's gone," Alexander told the press. I don't know how I'll live without her. But privately he was already moving her assets. He filed the necessary paperwork, forged signatures, and initiated the transfer of several accounts, including the trust her father had set aside for her. Isabel watched every move from her burner phone, her jaw tightening each time his face appeared on the news. By the end of that week she was no longer mourning her marriage. She was preparing her revenge. She dyed her hair chestnut brown, cut it short, and changed her name to Elise Duval. Using her father's old contacts, she arranged false documents and began building her next move, one that would not just expose Alexander but destroy the empire he built on lies. Still, late at night, when she lay awake in the silence of that small coastal villa, doubt crept in. What if it wasn't betrayal? What if it was all some misunderstanding? The part of her that still remembered his touch wanted to believe there was another explanation. But then she'd replay the message. He doesn't suspect a thing. And she'd remember the laughter between Alexander and Claudia on the yacht months ago, when she'd walked in unexpectedly and they'd said they were discussing investment terms. The same woman who disappeared conveniently before the explosion. No, Isabel thought. This was no misunderstanding. This was survival. 2 weeks after her death, a memorial was held in Monaco. Alexander stood at the podium, voice trembling as he read a eulogy written by a publicist. Cameras flashed. Mourners dabbed their eyes. In the back of the church, hidden beneath a black veil, Isabel watched every second. When he placed a white rose on the altar and whispered, "Goodbye, my love," she felt her nails dig into her palm until she bled. That night, back at her hideout, she opened her laptop and stared at the folder labeled VAS files. Inside were bank statements, call logs, and photos, enough to bury him. But Isabel wanted more than justice. She wanted him to feel the same helplessness she had felt when she realized her entire life was a lie. And that meant she couldn't just expose him. She had to make him believe he was haunted by her. So she began with whispers. A bouquet of her favorite flowers sent to his penthouse. No sender. An email from a blank address that read only, "You should have told me the truth." A song she used to hum, played from a street musician near his car one afternoon. Each time, Alexander's confidence wavered. His face in the news interviews grew paler, his eyes restless. To the world he was a grieving widower. To himself he was a man being hunted by his dead wife. And Isabel was just getting started. The first time Alexander saw her reflection, he thought he was losing his mind. It was during a charity gala in Geneva, 2 months after Isabel's death. The ballroom was gold-lit and full of laughter, but Alexander's smile never reached his eyes. He'd been drinking too much lately, sleeping too little. Every night he dreamed of the sea, of fire, of her hand slipping away into darkness. He told himself it was guilt. That grief looked like madness if you stared at it long enough. But that night, as he raised his glass to toast her memory, his gaze froze. Across the room, in the reflection of a tall mirror, he swore he saw her, brown hair, pale skin, the same eyes that used to look at him like he was her whole world. She was there one moment and gone the next, swallowed by the crowd. He blinked, his pulse racing. Maybe it was the champagne. Maybe it was conscience. But from that moment on, sleep became a stranger. Isabel, or Elise as she was known now, had planned it that way. She watched him through quiet corners of the internet, tracking his every move with a precision that felt surgical. Alexander had transferred her assets into his offshore accounts under the pretext of trust consolidation. He was careful but not careful enough. Every move he made left a trace. Every lie he told left a wound. Her ally, Captain Renault, helped her operate from a distance. He was old, gray-bearded, with a voice that rasped like gravel and a loyalty that had once belonged to Isabel's father. "You're playing a dangerous game, mademoiselle," he warned her one evening as they sat in the flickering light of a small seaside bar. "I'm playing his game," she replied. "I'm just better at it." He shook his head. "What's the end of it? Revenge or justice?" "Sometimes," she said softly, "they're the same thing." She didn't tell him that she had nightmares too, dreams of drowning, of fire, of Alexander's hands pulling her back from the edge only to let go again. But she buried that part of her, the part that still wanted to forgive. Forgiveness had no place in the plan. Her next step was psychological. She knew Alexander's weaknesses, the way he craved control, the way uncertainty drove him mad. So she began eroding that control piece by piece. She arranged for a small package to arrive at his penthouse in Zurich. A single wedding photo burned at the edges with a note in her handwriting. "Do you remember what you promised me?" Security footage showed nothing. No delivery person. No record. The package simply appeared. 2 days later, his assistant quit, terrified after overhearing him shouting at no one. He smashed mirrors, fired staff, hired new ones. His new girlfriend, Claudia Mertens, tried to calm him, but her patience was thin. The thrill of the affair had vanished. Now she was tethered to a man unraveling in front of her. "You need rest," she told him one morning. "You're paranoid." "Paranoid?" He laughed wild-eyed. "She's here, Claudia. She's everywhere. Someone is watching me." Claudia rolled her eyes. "She's dead, Alex. You saw the explosion. You gave the police her wedding ring." He rubbed his temples. "Then explain this." He handed her the burned photograph. Her face went pale. "She's not dead," he whispered. "She's playing with me." Claudia left that night. She packed her things and vanished to Lisbon, withdrawing a chunk of money from one of their shared accounts, money Isabel had already tracked. By the time Alexander realized Claudia was gone, so was most of his liquid cash. Elise watched from afar, a small smile touching her lips. One betrayal punishing another. But not everything went smoothly. One evening, as she was leaving her hideout in Portofino, she noticed a car following her. She tried to convince herself it was coincidence, but the same car appeared again the next day near the cafe where she met Renaud. When she mentioned it, his expression darkened. "He's looking for you." "Then he's getting closer than I expected," she said. Renaud grunted. "You can end this now. Leak the files, expose him, let the authorities handle it." But Isabel shook her head. "No. I want him to confess. In his own words. To the world." She had already laid the groundwork. Through a new identity and a web of anonymous emails, she had contacted an investigative journalist in London, a woman named Marianne Holt, someone known for bringing down corrupt tycoons. Marianne believed she was dealing with a whistleblower inside Voss Industries. In 3 weeks, Marianne would publish an exposé revealing the offshore accounts, the fake charities, the fraud. All Isabel needed was one thing: proof that Alexander orchestrated the explosion. That was the one piece she didn't yet have. So she did something reckless. She went back to Monaco. The city felt different now, louder, emptier, indifferent. No one looked twice at her. The brown hair, glasses, and neutral clothes turned her invisible. She booked a small apartment near the port and began watching from a distance. Alexander had returned too, supposedly to finalize her estate. He visited their old penthouse often, sometimes alone, sometimes with lawyers. Through the binoculars from her balcony, she could see the man he'd become. Thinner, jumpier, always glancing over his shoulder. She wanted to feel satisfaction. Instead, she felt a strange ache. One night, she saw him sitting by the window, a bottle beside him, staring into nothing. The light from the lamp caught his face, hollow eyes, rough stubble, the look of someone haunted by himself. For a fleeting second, she almost pitied him. But then her phone buzzed, an encrypted message from Marianne. "We found new leads on the explosion. Might need your help verifying details." Her heart raced. She typed back, "Meet me in person. Tomorrow night. Same cafe as before." But the next night, Marianne never showed up. Instead, 2 men in dark suits entered the cafe 15 minutes after the agreed time. They didn't order coffee. They sat near the door, scanning faces. Elise knew immediately. Her pulse jumped. She left her cup half-finished, slipped out the back, and disappeared into the alleyways. By the time she reached her apartment, she could hear sirens somewhere in the distance. She called Renaud. "They found me." "Stay calm," he said. "You need to disappear again. I can arrange." "No," she cut him off. "If I vanish now, he wins. He'll spin the story, call me a fraud, say I faked everything. No. I finish this." That night, she packed a small bag and transferred everything from her laptop to a secure drive. Then she wrote a letter, one she planned to send only if something happened to her. It began simply, "If you are reading this, my name was Isabelle Laurent." Meanwhile, across the city, Alexander was losing the last of his composure. His private investigator had failed to find Claudia, his accounts were under review, and a mysterious journalist had begun asking too many questions. Then one morning he received a message on his phone, a video file, no number, no sender. He hesitated before opening it. The screen flickered and there she was. Isabel. Her face was half in shadow, her voice calm. "Hello, Alexander." He froze, gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles went white. "If you're seeing this," she continued, "it means I'm alive. You tried to take everything from me. You lied, you stole, you killed. But I'm not the woman you buried. I'm the one who's coming back." The video ended. Alexander sank into the chair, staring at the blank screen. His breath came shallow and ragged. "No," he whispered. "It can't be. It can't be." But deep down he knew. The next day, news broke that several of Voss Industries' accounts had been frozen pending investigation. Marianne Holt had begun publishing her first report, citing internal sources and verified documents. Alexander panicked. He called his lawyers, his bankers, anyone who could help. No one answered. Word spread fast. His empire was collapsing. That evening, Isabel watched the headlines from her safe house, her fingers trembling as she scrolled. She had done it. The world was beginning to see him for what he was. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Something wasn't over. Renaud called. "He's leaving Monaco. Headed to Nice tonight." "Then so am I," she said. She didn't know why she needed to see him again, maybe to watch him fall, maybe to look him in the eyes one last time. Maybe to understand if she'd ever really loved him. At midnight, under the silver glow of streetlights, she saw him at the private dock. Alone, a suitcase in hand, the same arrogance still clinging to him like a dying flame. She stepped out from the shadows. "Going somewhere, Alexander?" He froze. Slowly he turned. When he saw her, the blood drained from his face. "Isabel?" he whispered. Her heart pounded. "You didn't expect me to survive, did you?" He took a step forward. "You're alive." "I am. Unfortunately for you." He laughed then, low and broken. "You think you've won? You don't know what you've started." "Then tell me," she said quietly. "What did I start?" He looked at her, eyes flickering with something between hatred and admiration. "You shouldn't have come back." "I had to," she replied. "To finish what you began." Before she could react, he lunged forward. She stumbled back, the bag in her hand falling to the ground. A flash of silver, a knife, glinted in the dock lights. "Alex." But before he could reach her, a voice shouted, "Police! Drop it!" Blue lights cut through the night. Officers rushed in, guns drawn. Alexander froze, the knife slipping from his hand as they surrounded him. Someone had tipped them off. As they dragged him away, he turned back to her. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." She watched in silence as they took him. The waves lapped gently at the dock, calm and endless. For the first time in months, Isabel let herself breathe. But deep inside she knew this wasn't over. Alexander Voss didn't go down easily. And the worst secrets, the ones that could still destroy her, hadn't even surfaced yet. The sea was quiet the morning after Alexander's arrest. Isabel sat on the balcony of a small hotel overlooking the harbor in Nice, sipping coffee she could barely taste. The world outside had begun to move again, but inside her head, the waves hadn't stopped crashing. Alexander Voss was in custody. The man who'd taken her love, her fortune, and almost her life was behind bars. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like something unfinished. The news spread fast. Billionaire arrested in offshore fraud scandal. Voss Industries faces collapse. Her photo appeared everywhere. Her wedding portrait, her memorial image, the smiling face of a woman the world still believed to be dead. She kept the curtains closed. The fewer eyes on her, the better. Only Captain Renaud and Marianne Holt knew she was alive, and both had promised silence until the full investigation was done. Still, Isabel couldn't shake the unease in her chest. It started that night on the dock, when she looked into Alexander's eyes as they took him away. He hadn't looked defeated. He'd looked confident. Almost as if he knew something she didn't. The next day, Renaud visited her with a newspaper tucked under his arm. "He's being transferred to Monaco," he said. "Charges include fraud, embezzlement and attempted murder." But, he hesitated. "But what?" "They can't find evidence connecting him to the explosion." She frowned. "Of course they can't." He covered his tracks. Renaud shook his head slowly. "Or someone else did." The words sat heavy between them. Later, when he left, Isabel went back to the files. Every document, every message she'd collected. She replayed the video of the explosion again and again. The blast pattern. The smoke. The fire rising from below deck, near the engine room. She remembered the tremor, the heat, the deafening crack. But something didn't add up. Alexander wasn't near the controls that night. In fact, she recalled seeing him on the upper deck moments before the explosion. So who triggered it? She tried calling Marianne to discuss her doubts, but the journalist didn't answer. That was strange. Marianne was meticulous, responsive, and fearless, the kind of woman who replied to messages even at 3 a.m. Isabel tried again. Nothing. Hours passed. By evening she couldn't sit still anymore. She left her hotel disguised as usual and walked to a nearby cafe. It was there, on a muted television screen, that she saw it, a headline crawling across the bottom in French. British journalist found dead in Paris apartment. Suspected overdose. The coffee cup slipped from her hands. Marianne. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She rushed outside, breathing hard, the world spinning. An overdose. They said it was an overdose. But Marianne didn't drink. She didn't take drugs. Someone had silenced her. And suddenly Alexander's look of calm during his arrest made sense. He wasn't afraid because he wasn't alone. He still had allies, powerful ones. That night, Isabel went to Renaud again. He opened the door before she could knock twice, concern etched into his face. "You've seen the news?" she said. He nodded grimly. "I warned you, child. This goes deeper than you think." She slammed her hands on the table. "Then tell me who's protecting him." He hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were photos, grainy surveillance shots, names, documents. One name stood out, Adrian Voss. Alexander's older brother. "He runs the Voss Family Foundation," Renaud said. "Quiet type. Always stayed in the shadows. But he's the one who moves the real money." Isabel stared at the name. "I met him once. At our engagement dinner. He barely spoke." "That's how he works," Renaud said. "He's the one who made the explosion disappear. Paid off the investigators. Cleaned up the trail." "Why would he protect Alexander?" Renaud sighed. "Because if Alexander goes down, the whole family goes down. And Adrian's not the type to let that happen." Isabel felt the air leave her lungs. "So Marianne's death." He nodded. "A warning." She looked out the window, her hands trembling. "Then it's not over. It's only beginning." Over the next few days, Isabel moved again, this time to a small villa outside Milan. She needed distance to think, to rebuild a plan. Her anger had turned cold now, no longer a fire but a blade. If Adrian Voss was the one pulling strings, then he was the true enemy. But exposing him wouldn't be easy. Adrian didn't make mistakes. He operated through front companies, proxies, and loyal men who never asked questions. Isabel needed proof, not of fraud this time but of murder. She decided to go after the source, the engineer who had maintained the yacht Celeste. His name was Marco Delane, a French mechanic who'd worked for the Voss family for years. She found him in Marseille working in a small shipyard. When she approached him, he didn't recognize her at first. But when she removed her sunglasses, his face drained of color. "Madame Laurent," he whispered. "You're supposed to be dead." "Yes, I know," she said. "And you're supposed to be honest. We both have our secrets." He swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" "The truth. About the explosion." Marco looked around nervously. "I can't talk about that." "Because you were paid not to," she said quietly. "By Adrian Voss." His eyes darted to hers. "How do you know that name?" "Because he's the one who tried to erase me." For a long time Marco said nothing. Then he sighed and sat on a crate. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way," he murmured. "They said it was just a malfunction, a small fire to destroy some evidence. But someone changed the wiring. The blast was too strong. Too targeted." "Who?" He hesitated. "I don't know. Adrian handled it through a man named Bruckner. German accent. Private contractor. After the explosion, Adrian paid me double and told me to disappear." "Where can I find Bruckner?" Marco shook his head. "You don't. You pray he never finds you." But Isabel wasn't praying anymore. She was planning. That night, she contacted an old cybersecurity expert her father had once trusted, a woman named Layla who now lived in Berlin. Within 2 days, Layla traced Bruckner's identity and found an address. He ran a security consultancy near Hamburg. Isabel knew what she had to do. She booked a flight under a new alias, packed her documents, and told Renaud only what was necessary. "If you don't hear from me in 3 days," she said, "send everything to the press." He didn't try to stop her. He just hugged her tightly and said, "Be careful, child. Revenge feeds itself." When she arrived in Hamburg, the city felt colder, harsher, steel-gray skies and rain that seemed to follow her. She found Bruckner's office easily enough. From the outside it looked like a small logistics firm. Inside she expected cameras, alarms, security. Instead she found it empty. A single desk. A single folder. And on it her name. She froze. The folder contained photos, her in Milan, in Marseille, even in Nice. Someone had been tracking her for weeks. And inside a single sheet of paper, "You're next." Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A man's voice, deep, calm. You should have stayed dead, Isabel. Adrian, she said quietly. I suppose congratulations are in order. My brother's in prison, my company's under fire, and yet here you are. Still breathing. You killed Marianne. Collateral damage, he said. She was going to expose something much larger than you or Alexander. What did you do, Adrian? He chuckled. Let's just say your father's empire wasn't as clean as you remember. You inherited more than his money, you inherited his sins. The line went dead. Isabel's knees gave way and she sat on the floor, shaking. Her father? No. He had been strict, proud, maybe even ruthless, but not corrupt. And yet Adrian's words echoed like poison in her head. She left the building quickly, every instinct screaming that she wasn't safe. Rain poured down as she ran through the empty streets, clutching the folder under her coat. When she finally reached her hotel, the door was ajar. She froze. Inside, the room had been searched. Her bag spilled open, clothes tossed, the laptop gone. Someone had been there, waiting for her. She turned to leave, but a voice came from behind her. Looking for something? Alexander stood in the doorway, a faint smirk on his bruised face. He was supposed to be in custody. She backed away slowly. How did you? Money buys freedom, darling, he said. Even in Monaco. Her pulse thundered. What do you want? He stepped closer. You took everything from me. My company, my reputation. You made me a ghost. You made me one first. He laughed softly. Touché. But there's something you don't understand, Isabel. Adrian's not my enemy. He's my insurance. And he's been expecting you. Before she could react, someone grabbed her from behind, a gloved hand over her mouth, the scent of chemicals flooding her senses. Her vision blurred. The last thing she saw was Alexander's cold smile. Then everything went black. Darkness. A soft, humming sound. The faint echo of dripping water. When Isabel opened her eyes, she couldn't move. Her wrists were tied behind her back, a sharp ache pulsing through her arms. The air smelled of concrete, oil, and metal. Somewhere above her, a single fluorescent light flickered weakly, casting a ghostly glow on the walls. Her head throbbed. She tried to remember how she got there, the hotel room, Alexander, the hand over her mouth, then nothing. She forced herself upright, her vision slowly clearing. She was in a warehouse. Cold, empty, and isolated. A steel door stood across the room. Near it, a small table with 2 chairs, and on it, her missing laptop, a phone, and the folder she had taken from Bruckner's office. Then she heard footsteps. Alexander walked in first, calm and collected, wearing a tailored coat as if he'd just stepped out of a board meeting instead of a kidnapping. Behind him came Adrian Voss, taller, older, his hair silver at the temples, eyes as sharp as broken glass. Well, Adrian said softly, the dead bride rises again. Isabel glared at him. You killed Marianne. Adrian smiled. Technically, I had her silenced. You, on the other hand, are a more complicated matter. Alexander poured himself a drink from a flask he carried, his hand steady. You should have stayed hidden, Isabel. You were clever enough to fake your death. You could have started over. She spat the words out like venom. I wasn't going to let you get away with what you did. He took a sip. You still think I planned that explosion, don't you? I don't think, she snapped. I know. Adrian chuckled. You're wrong, my dear. Alexander couldn't have killed you. He didn't have the courage. Then who did? She demanded. Adrian walked closer, his footsteps echoing on the concrete. Your father. The room seemed to tilt. You're lying. Am I? He said quietly. Tell me, Isabel, did you ever wonder why he kept me close all those years? Why he invested in Voss Industries? Your father's company wasn't just real estate and investments. It laundered money for half of Europe's politicians. When he died, he left you everything, including the evidence that could destroy them. The explosion wasn't to kill you. It was to destroy that evidence. You just happened to be on board. Isabel shook her head, her throat tight. No. My father would never. Your father trusted the wrong people, Adrian interrupted. Just as you did. She turned to Alexander. You knew. He hesitated. For a brief moment, something human flickered in his eyes. I found out after the wedding. Adrian told me what the explosion was really for. He said it was a mistake, that you were never meant to die. But by then the company was in my name, the accounts were already moving, and I thought if I kept quiet I could fix it. Fix it? Isabel laughed bitterly. You stole from me. I stole to survive, he said flatly. You think any of this money was clean? You think your fortune wasn't soaked in blood already? Her voice trembled. You could have told me the truth. He sighed. Would you have believed me? Silence hung in the room. Only the hum of the light and the soft clink of ice in his glass filled the space. Adrian broke it with a cold smile. The problem now, Isabel, is that you've seen too much. And you've dragged attention to places that should have stayed buried. The journalist, the leaks, the arrests, it's all very inconvenient. You can't silence everyone, she said. He tilted his head. I don't need to. Just you. He raised a small pistol from his coat pocket. Alexander stiffened. Adrian, wait. Don't pretend you care, Adrian said dryly. She's the one who ruined your life. Alexander's jaw tightened. He looked at Isabel, and for a moment she thought she saw regret there. She's not the problem, he said quietly. You are. Adrian turned toward him, annoyed. Excuse me? Alexander stepped forward. You've been using everyone. Me. Isabel. Even my company. You never cared about protecting the family. You just wanted control. Adrian smiled faintly. Control is survival, brother. Something you were never capable of. And that was when Alexander moved. He lunged forward, grabbing the gun. The two men struggled, their shouts echoing through the warehouse. Isabel pulled against the ropes, the pain in her wrists sharp and searing. She twisted, reached for the edge of the chair, and finally felt the knot give way. The gun went off, once, twice. Adrian stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, blood blooming through his shirt. Alexander turned to Isabel, eyes wide, breath ragged. Run, he shouted. She hesitated only a second before bolting for the door. Behind her, footsteps, shouts, another gunshot. The metal door burst open into the freezing night. She ran, the rain slicing against her face, her heart slamming in her chest. She didn't stop until she reached the main road, headlights blinding her as a truck passed. She waved frantically, but the driver didn't see her. Then a hand grabbed her wrist. She spun. It was Alexander, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, breathing hard. You're insane, she gasped. Probably, he said. But I just saved your life. Behind them, the warehouse glowed orange. Flames climbed the walls, the fire spreading fast. Adrian? She asked. Alexander looked back, his jaw set. He's not walking out of there. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police, maybe fire. They stood there in the rain, soaked and silent. Isabel wanted to scream, cry, hit him, but all she could do was stare at the man she once loved and the life that had just burned to ash. You can still expose them, he said quietly. Everything Adrian told you, it's true. The files, the accounts, your father's network. It's all in the backup drives. They're hidden in Switzerland under your father's old alias. Finish it. End it properly. Why are you telling me this? She asked. He gave a weary smile. Because I owe you one truth before I disappear. And then he turned and walked into the darkness before the police arrived. She didn't see him again. Days later, Isabel sat in a government office in Geneva, surrounded by lawyers and investigators. She gave them everything, the files, the emails, the accounts. She told them about Adrian, about the explosion, about her father's hidden dealings. It took months, but the truth came out. Adrian Voss died in the fire that night. Alexander Voss was declared missing. The authorities assumed he'd drowned near Marseille a week later when a body washed up wearing his watch. Isabel never confirmed if it was him. Voss Industries collapsed. Her father's old company was dismantled. The offshore networks were exposed, the politicians named, the accounts seized. And Isabel Laurent, once the billionaire bride, the grieving widow, the ghost, quietly donated her fortune to the victims of the people her father's empire had exploited. She vanished after that. No interviews, no statements, no farewell. But sometimes in coastal towns across Europe, people claim to see her, a woman with chestnut hair and sad eyes, sitting alone at seaside cafes, always facing the water. Captain Renault saw her once in Marseille. She didn't speak, just smiled faintly when he sat beside her. You got what you wanted, he said softly. Justice. She watched the waves roll in and whispered, justice, yes. But never peace. He nodded. What will you do now? She took a slow sip of her coffee. Live, she said. For the first time, live without lies. As the sun dipped into the horizon, painting the water in gold, she closed her eyes. The sea still carried the ghosts of her past, the fire, the betrayal, the love that died and refused to stay buried. But now, at least, it also carried the truth. And that, she decided, was enough.